Number 1. Lonnie Franklin Jr. Lonnie Franklin Jr. moved through South Los Angeles like a man nobody noticed, the kind of neighbor people waved to without thinking twice. He fixed cars, shared plates of barbecue, helped people with broken appliances, and blended quietly into the noise of the city. Nobody looking at him would have guessed he was living a double life, or that behind the calm, ordinary exterior was someone who would later be unmasked as one of the most quietly persistent serial predators the area had ever seen. He operated in the shadows, targeting vulnerable women, slipping through law enforcement cracks, and taking advantage of a city already stretched thin by crime, poverty, and lack of resources. For years, the only real trace he left behind was a growing line of cold cases and a disturbing pattern that almost no one recognized in time. The victims were women who were often overlooked by society, women struggling with addiction, homelessness, or instability. He chose people the world rarely stops to protect, people who were less likely to be reported missing right away. He didn't leave messages, didn't taunt the police, didn't chase fame the way some serial killers do. He preferred silence. He preferred victims who were isolated. He preferred to vanish back into his quiet, friendly persona immediately after. But as careful as he tried to be, he made one critical mistake. He left behind biological evidence, and even though DNA technology wasn't strong enough to catch him when he started, that trail would one day catch up to him. His crimes stretched from the mid-1980s into the early 2000s, long enough that investigators believed the killer may have died or left the state because the murders seemed to stop. That long pause is where he got the nickname the Grim Sleeper, a label that suggested he had taken a break, as if his violence had been put on hold. But the truth was even more disturbing. The gap didn't necessarily mean he stopped completely. It meant he was choosing victims who were never connected back to the wider pattern. By the time the task force revisited these cases with new forensic tools, they realized the crimes were committed by the same individual. But identifying him was nearly impossible without a direct match. However, science was evolving faster than the killer could hide. When detectives began retesting old evidence using updated methods, a pattern emerged, and multiple cases that had seemed disconnected suddenly linked to one unknown male profile. This DNA belonged to the same individual who had been leaving bodies in alleys, dumpsters, and abandoned lots for years. Even though the killer wasn't in any major DNA database, investigators discovered something extraordinary, a near match. It didn't point to Lonnie directly, but instead flagged his son, whose DNA had been entered into the system after a minor arrest. That partial hit changed everything. It meant the suspect was blood related to the son, and investigators narrowed their list until one man stood out, Lonnie Franklin Jr. Undercover officers staged a plan that felt more like a movie than a routine police operation. They posed as restaurant workers at a local pizza spot and intentionally left behind utensils, napkins, and dishes that Lonnie used. When he finished eating, officers collected the items and rushed them to the lab. The DNA from those items matched perfectly with the DNA from the crime scenes. After decades of silence, frustration, dead ends, and fear within the community, the identity of the Grim Sleeper was finally confirmed. His arrest stunned everyone who knew him. Neighbors couldn't reconcile the helpful, quiet man they saw at block parties with the predator described by investigators. Inside his home, detectives found a stash of photographs, hundreds of images of women, many of whom were never identified. Some were alive in the photographs, others were believed to have met tragic fates. The discovery raised questions about how many victims there truly were. Prosecutors moved forward with the cases they could prove beyond any doubt using DNA and other evidence. The trial revealed disturbing details about how long he had operated and how confidently he moved through the community, convinced he would never be caught. Forensic teams described how biological evidence left at the scenes formed the backbone of the case. DNA didn't blink, didn't change its story, and didn't forget. No matter how many years passed, the science had preserved the truth. Although the script of justice moved slowly, it moved with precision. Lonnie stayed mostly emotionless in court, watching as the prosecution meticulously connected each victim, each crime scene, and each DNA sample directly back to him. Family members of victims described years of pain, unanswered questions, and the feeling of being ignored. Many said the most painful part was believing justice would never come. And yet, it was Dina, the silent witness, that forced the truth into the light. It didn't matter that decades had passed. The evidence waited patiently, and when the technology finally caught up, it spoke loudly enough to bring one of Los Angeles' most elusive serial predators to a courtroom he could no longer escape. The case became one of the strongest examples of how modern forensic science can resurrect cold cases and expose killers who once seemed untouchable. He was convicted of multiple murders, each tied directly to him through biological samples he thought would never be traced. Even after years of inactivity, a single strand of evidence was enough to unravel everything he had built to hide behind. Lonnie Franklin Jr. spent decades slipping away from suspicion, but in the end, the one thing he couldn't control brought his crimes into the open and ended the story he tried so long to bury. Number 2. Rex Heuermann. It all started unraveling in May 2010 when a young woman named Shannon Gilbert, a 23-year-old escort, vanished after a frantic 911 call from a client's home in Oak Beach. She screamed that someone was trying to kill her, running erratically through the neighborhood before disappearing into the marshy night. Her case drew police attention, but it was the search for her that uncovered something far more sinister. In December 2010, Suffolk County police officer John Malia and his cadaver dog Blue were combing the thick brambles along the parkway. What they found wasn't Gilbert, it was the skeletal remains of Melissa Barthelemy, a 24-year-old from Buffalo who had moved to the Bronx to work as a hairstylist, but turned to escorting on Craigslist to make ends meet. Her body was wrapped in decaying burlap, hidden in the dense shrubbery, her petite frame, just 4 feet 10 inches and 95 pounds, strangled and discarded like trash. The discovery sent shockwaves through the department, prompting a wider search. Within days, 3 more bodies emerged in the same desolate strip: Maureen Brainard Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello. These women, later dubbed the Gilgo Four, shared haunting similarities. They were all small-statured sex workers advertising online, lured by clients promising quick cash, only to meet a brutal end. Brainard Barnes, 25, from Connecticut, was a mother of 2 struggling with bills. She disappeared in July 2007 after heading to Manhattan for a date. Her body was bound with 3 leather belts, her life choked out in a calculated act of violence. Waterman, 22, from Maine, vanished in June 2010 from a Hopage motel, a victim of sex trafficking who left behind a young daughter. Costello, 27, from North Carolina, had battled heroin addiction and was last seen in September 2010 after accepting an unusually high offer of $1,500 from a stranger in a dark SUV. Each was strangled, their bodies wrapped in burlap sacks and buried in the marshy overgrowth, exposed to the elements for years. The killer had chosen this remote barrier island spot wisely, isolated, accessible only by a lonely highway, where the Atlantic's roar drowned out any echoes of screams. As the investigation expanded in March and April 2011, the horror deepened. Partial remains of Jessica Taylor, a 20-year-old escort from Manhattan, were found further east along the parkway. Her torso had been discovered back in 2003 in the woods of Manorville, about 45 miles away, mutilated with her identifying tattoo hacked off in a crude attempt to erase her identity. Her head, hands, and forearm turned up in 2011, confirming the dismemberment. Similarly, Valerie Mack, 24, who went by Melissa Taylor, had gone missing in 2000 from New Jersey. Her partial remains, torso in Manorville in 2000, head and limbs in 2011, showed the same savage pattern, strangled, chopped up, and scattered like discarded parts. Then there was Sandra Costilla, 28, from Trinidad, found in 1993 in a wooded area in North Sea, her body beaten and strangled, hairs clinging to her that would later become crucial. These women weren't random. The killer targeted escorts, often petite and desperate, using Craigslist to set traps. He strangled them in moments of vulnerability, sometimes dismembering them with cold precision, wrapping parts in plastic or burlap, and dumping them in places he knew well: forested areas, beaches, parkways where joggers and drivers passed unknowingly. The taunting added a layer of psychological cruelty. After Barthelemy's disappearance, her teenage sister received chilling calls from an unknown man using Melissa's own phone. He mocked her, saying her sister was a whore who'd met a bad end, describing her death in vile detail before hanging up. The calls were traced to crowded areas in Manhattan, like Times Square and Madison Square Garden, where the killer blended into the masses. For years, the case went cold. 11 bodies in total were linked to the area, including unidentified victims like an Asian male dressed in women's clothing, beaten to death, and a mother-daughter pair later identified as Peaches and her toddler, but not connected to this killer. The investigation was plagued by scandals. Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke, who took over in 2012, allegedly obstructed FBI involvement, leading to his own downfall. He was convicted in 2016 for beating a suspect and covering it up, serving time in federal prison. Leads dried up, families waited in agony. But in 2022, a renewed task force from multiple agencies breathed life into the probe. They revisited old evidence with new eyes, focusing on burner phones used to contact the victims, cheap disposable cells pinging off towers near Midtown Manhattan and Massapequa Park on Long Island. One witness from Costello's case recalled a large man in a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche, a detail that narrowed suspects. Enter Rex Hoyerman, a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park, a quiet suburb just 15 miles from Gilgo Beach. He fit the profile: tall, imposing at 6 feet 4 inches, owner of a green Avalanche, and a Manhattan office where those taunting calls originated. Investigators tailed him for months, watching his routines. In January 2023, they struck gold, or rather, pizza crust. Hoyerman tossed a half-eaten slice into a Fifth Avenue trash bin. Lab techs extracted DNA from the crust, comparing it to a male hair found on the burlap wrapping Costello's body. It matched with overwhelming probability. But that was just the start. Advanced DNA technology, like whole genome sequencing, allowed experts to pull nuclear DNA from rootless hairs, tiny, degraded strands that traditional methods couldn't touch. These hairs, found on 6 of the 7 victims, linked directly to Hoyerman, his ex-wife, and daughter. Prosecutors believed the family hairs transferred via Hoyerman, as his wife and kids were often away during the summer murder windows, leaving him alone in their cluttered home. One hair on Brainerd Barnes's belt buckle matched his wife's DNA. Another on Costello's body was his own. The evidence piled up: 46 burner phones in his possession, Google searches for sadistic torture porn, child abuse images, and queries like why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught? He even had a Microsoft Word planning document in his basement, outlining steps to hunt, kill, and dispose of victims, methods mirroring the crimes, like using belts for restraint and avoiding traceable evidence. Cell records placed him near the victims' last known locations, his Tinder profile linked to a burner phone used for escorts. On July 13, 2023, SWAT teams arrested Hoyerman outside his Manhattan office, a mundane end to a monster's run. He pleaded not guilty, tearfully denying the charges in court. But the DNA didn't lie. It was the unbreakable thread that wove through the case, catching a killer who'd evaded justice for decades. Charges mounted. First the Gilgo 4, then Brainerd Barnes in January 2024, Taylor and Costello in June, and Mack in December, bringing 7 second-degree murder counts spanning 1993 to 2010. His home was a hoarder's nightmare, filled with over 200 guns, vaults of weapons, and rooms stacked with junk, hinting at a controlled exterior hiding chaos. As of early 2026, the trial looms, set for January 13. A judge ruled in September 2025 that the cutting-edge DNA evidence is admissible, despite defense challenges calling it unproven. Hoyerman's lawyers argue the tech lacks acceptance and push to sever charges, but prosecutors see a pattern: a family man by day, architect sketching buildings, but by night, a hunter using his knowledge of Long Island's hidden spots to bury his secrets. The families of the victims, long silenced by grief, now watch as science delivers justice. Number 3. John Nicholas Athan. In the misty, affluent enclave of Seattle's Magnolia neighborhood, where tree-lined streets hid dark secrets, a 13-year-old girl named Kristen Sumstad met a gruesome fate on a chilly November night in 1982. Kristen, a slight girl just over 5 feet tall and weighing only 87 pounds, had a troubled home life. She often wandered away, crashing with friends or siblings rather than staying put. On November 12, she was last seen alive, perhaps seeking solace or adventure in the familiar blocks around her sister's apartment. But by the next morning, her young life had been snuffed out in a calculated act of violence. Her body was discovered stuffed into a discarded cardboard television box behind the S&W TV, an appliance store on West Dravis Street, partially nude, her neck bruised from strangulation by a bathrobe belt tightened with merciless force. Semen stains on her body revealed she'd been raped, the assault likely happening elsewhere before her remains were callously dumped, like refuse in the alley, exposed to the elements overnight. The killer had dragged her there, leaving her purse in a bag nearby, eliminating robbery as a motive. This was personal, deliberate, a predator's cold execution that took time and planning. Investigators arrived at the grim scene, the box reeking of death amid the urban quiet. Kristen had been sexually active for her age, but this was no consensual encounter. The evidence screamed violation and murder. Detectives canvassed the area, interviewing neighbors and piecing together timelines. One detail stood out. A witness spotted a 14-year-old local boy, John Nicholas Athan, pushing a hand truck down the street that very night, hauling a large brown box that matched the one cradling Kristen's corpse. Athan, a neighborhood kid from a Greek immigrant family, lived nearby and knew the Sumstad sisters well. He had a crush on Kristen's older sister, Lorraine, hanging around their home, trying to impress her with awkward teenage charm. But the sisters saw him as just a friend, nothing more. When questioned, Athan claimed he was out scavenging firewood from neighbors, using the cart to haul logs. It seemed suspicious. Why a large box for wood? But without hard evidence, he walked free. Semen samples were collected from the body, but in 1982, DNA technology was rudimentary, a far cry from today's forensic miracles. The case file gathered dust, one of hundreds of unsolved homicides in Seattle as years turned to decades and families grieved without closure. Kristen's loved ones never forgot. Her sister Lorraine, who had taken Kristen in at times, was haunted by the loss, the image of her little sibling discarded like trash burning in her mind. The police, too, kept the file alive, revisiting it periodically. In 1992, a decade after the killing, scientists at the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab tried to extract a DNA profile from the preserved semen, but the sample was too degraded for the era's tools, another dead end. Athan, meanwhile, grew up and moved on. He relocated to New Jersey, married, started a construction business, and built a seemingly normal life, far from the shadows of Magnolia. But in 2002, advances in DNA amplification changed everything. Cold case detectives Richard Gagnon and Greg Mixell, working on a shoestring budget amid 300 other forgotten files, dusted off the evidence. This time, using polymerase chain reaction techniques, they pulled a clear male profile from the sperm stains. It was uploaded to state and federal databases like CODIS, but no hits emerged. The killer wasn't in the system, yet. Undeterred, the detectives zeroed in on their old suspect, Athan, now 35, living in Palisades Park, New Jersey. They needed his DNA without tipping him off or violating his rights. Enter a clever ruse, a sting operation blending old-school cunning with modern science. Posing as attorneys from a fictional law firm, they mailed Ethan a letter in mid-February 2003. It claimed he was eligible for a class action lawsuit payout over overcharged Seattle parking tickets from years ago, up to $1,000 if he joined. All he had to do was fill out the enclosed form and return it in the provided envelope. The bait worked. Ethan, enticed by the easy money, licked the flap to seal it and mailed it back. Weeks later, on April 23, forensic scientist Beverly Himmick at the state lab confirmed the saliva's DNA matched the semen from Kristen's body with astronomical odds, 1 in 11 quadrillion. It was him. The teenager who'd pushed that cart had grown into a man hiding a monstrous secret. On May 21, 2003, SWAT teams swooped in at a New Jersey construction site, arresting Ethan as he worked. Extradited to Washington, he faced first-degree murder charges, his ordinary life shattered. He pleaded not guilty, his attorney John Munster arguing the DNA trick was an illegal search, a violation of privacy. But courts disagreed. The Washington Supreme Court would later rule in 2007 that once Ethan voluntarily mailed the envelope to what he thought were lawyers, he had no expectation of privacy in the saliva left behind. It was akin to trash discarded on the curb, fair game for police. The trial began in January 2004 before Judge Sharon Armstrong in King County Superior Court. Prosecutors painted Ethan as a calculated killer. He knew Kristen, had access, and his story about firewood was a flimsy lie. The DNA was irrefutable proof of sexual contact, and the timing placed him at the scene. Deputy Prosecutor Steve Fogg described how Ethan denied any intercourse until confronted with the evidence, then feigned shock. Witnesses recounted seeing him with the cart. Experts detailed the strangulation marks, the deliberate dumping. Defense countered fiercely. Munster admitted the DNA showed sex, but insisted it could have been consensual earlier, not linked to the murder. No Ethan DNA on the bathrobe belt or under Kristen's nails. No scratches, no struggle evidence tying him directly to the killing. Fingerprints at the scene didn't match. Sumstad had been sexually active, they argued, and the evidence fell short of beyond reasonable doubt. But the jury saw through it. After deliberations, they convicted Ethan of second-degree murder, a lesser charge reflecting perhaps his youth at the time. Sentenced to 10 to 20 years under pre-1984 indeterminate guidelines, he entered prison. His marriage dissolved, his business lost. Appeals followed. Ethan challenged the DNA ruse as a Fourth Amendment violation, but in a landmark 2007 decision, the Washington Supreme Court upheld the conviction 6-3. Justice Charles Johnson wrote that the police deception didn't infringe on privacy rights. The envelope was sent into the world, its contents analyzable. Dissenters worried about government overreach, but the ruling stood, setting precedent for creative DNA collection in cold cases. Ethan served his time quietly, expressing remorse in letters to family. By 2011, at age 43, he sought parole. The Indeterminate Sentence Review Board initially approved release after 7 years, citing his teenage impulse and lack of further crimes. But Kristen's sister Lorraine Dean fought back, outraged that her sister's rapist and killer could walk free after evading justice for 20 years. He knew what he was doing, she said, pushing for the full term. The board paused, holding a hearing, but ultimately granted parole on July 21, 2011, with conditions, no contact with victim's family, supervision, and a ban from King County. Ethan walked out, moving in with his brother Jim in Redmond, who had campaigned for his release via a Facebook page arguing for second chances. Jim described John as changed, remorseful, ready to work at his ironworks company. But for the Sumstads, closure was bittersweet, justice delayed, diluted by time. Dina had finally caught the killer who'd blended back into society, proving that even licked envelopes can unravel decades of deception. The case highlighted forensic evolution, from failed 1992 tests to 2003's triumphant match, a testament to persistent detectives who turned a cold trail hot. Kristen, the girl in the box, could rest knowing her killer's freedom came at a cost. his secret exposed by the unyielding code in his cells. Yet questions lingered. Why her? What drove a 14-year-old to such brutality? The answers died with the act, leaving only the stark reality that science can resurrect truth from the grave, no matter how buried. Number 4. Gary Hartman. In the leafy expanse of Tacoma's Puget Park, a sunny March day in 1986 turned into a nightmare for 12-year-old Michella Welch. On March 26, the 6th grader was babysitting her 2 younger sisters and brother at the park, a familiar spot near their North End home. Around 10 a.m., she pedaled her pink 10 speed bike to fetch hot dogs from home for lunch, leaving the kids playing by a makeshift fire pit. She returned briefly, then vanished around 11 a.m. while heading to the bathroom. Hours later, as worry mounted, her sisters searched frantically. They found her bike abandoned near the restrooms, hidden behind a log, but no sign of Michella. Panic set in, family and police combed the area. That evening, a police dog named Bisa led searchers to a grim discovery in a dense, overgrown gulch 300 yards away, Michella's body partially hidden under branches and debris. The petite girl, just 5 feet tall and 80 pounds, had been savagely raped, her throat slashed with brutal force, leaving deep gashes that severed her jugular and caused her to bleed out in agony. Blood soaked her shirt, pulled up over her chest, her underwear and shoes were missing, later found nearby with more evidence of the assault. Semen stains on her body told of the violation, a calculated attack that likely took place in the secluded spot, her screams muffled by the park's isolation. Tacoma reeled from the horror. Michella, a bright kid with shoulder-length brown hair and a love for drawing, had been snatched in broad daylight from a place meant for innocence. Detectives scoured the scene, footprints, a single brown hair on her hand, and those crucial semen samples preserved on swabs. Over 100 people were interviewed, joggers, picnickers, even a man seen lingering suspiciously, but leads fizzled. Suspicion fell on a few locals, including a man with a history of assaults, but alibis held. The case linked eerily to another. 5 months later, 13-year-old Jennifer Bastian vanished while biking in Point Defiance Park, her body found strangled and raped in a similar gulch. Police initially thought one killer stalked Tacoma's girls, dubbing him the Park Killer. But nah would later prove otherwise. In 2006, advanced testing pulled a male DNA profile from Michella's swabs, uploaded to Cody's, but no matches surfaced. The file gathered dust among 50 cold cases, haunting detectives like Gene Miller and Lindsay Wade, who joined the unit in 2013, vowing to crack it. Years passed. Michella's family endured the void. Her mother, Barbara Leonard, relocated but never forgot. Sisters Jennifer and Nicole spoke of the lost sibling, the park now a tainted memory. In 2016, Na confirmed the Bastian and Welch killers were different. Bastian solved in 2018 with Robert Washburn's arrest via genealogy. For Michella, hope flickered in 2017 when Tacoma PD sent evidence to Parabon Nanolabs. Using snapshot technology, they built a suspect profile: white male, hazel eyes, freckles, red blonde hair. More crucially, genetic genealogist C.C. Moore uploaded the DNA to GEDmatch, a public database. Building a family tree from distant cousins, she traced lineages back generations, narrowing to the Hartman family in Tacoma. 2 brothers fit the age, Gary and his sibling, both living near Puget Park in 1986. Gary Charles Hartman, then 22, had grown into a 66-year-old registered nurse at Western State Hospital, a psychiatric facility. Divorced with kids, he lived quietly in Lakewood, no criminal record, blending into suburbia. Detectives tailed the brothers discreetly. In May 2018, they watched Gary Hartman at a coffee shop, discarding a brown paper napkin after wiping his mouth. Snagged from the trash, it went to the Washington State Patrol Lab. On June 5, results confirmed, Hartman's DNA matched the semen on Michella's body with odds defying chance. 1 in quadrillion. His brother's straw sample cleared him. Hartman had lived blocks from the park. likely spotting Michela alone, dragging her to the gulch for the rape, and slashing her throat to silence her forever. On June 20th, 2018, during a routine traffic stop in Lakewood, SWAT swarmed. Hartman, stunned, was arrested for first-degree murder and rape. He denied everything, but the Dina was ironclad. In jailhouse calls, he lamented his fate, claiming innocence to family. The trial, delayed by COVID, began in March 2022 before Judge Stanley Rumbaugh, in a bench format at Hartman's request, no jury, fearing bias. Prosecutors detailed the evidence, the Dina match, his proximity, the brutality. Defense attorney Brian Hirschman argued contamination or coincidence, noting no eyewitnesses, no confession, and Hartman's clean life. But Rumbaugh convicted him of first-degree murder on March 22, merging the rape charge. Sentencing that day, Hartman, 70 and frail, sobbed apologies. "I'm so sorry for what happened to Michela. I can't imagine the pain." But victim statements scorched him. Nicole called him a monster hiding in plain sight. Jennifer demanded he rot. Rumbaugh imposed 26 years and 6 months, the maximum under 1986 guidelines, ensuring Hartman dies in prison. The case underscored Dina's power, from a discarded napkin to justice, delayed 32 years. Michela's family found closure, her memorial at the park a reminder of innocence lost. Hartman, the unassuming nurse who'd cared for the vulnerable by day, exposed as the predator who stole a child's life in a moment of depraved impulse. Science unraveled his secret, proving no grave stays silent forever. Number 5. Jerry Westrom. In the gritty underbelly of South Minneapolis, inside the towering Horn Towers apartment complex, 35-year-old Jeannie Childs met a savage end on a warm June night in 1993. Childs, a woman who'd fled home at 13 and fallen into sex work to survive, lived a hard life marked by bad choices, but anchored by a family's quiet love. On June 13, a friend forced open her locked door after no answer, stumbling into a blood-soaked nightmare. Childs lay sprawled on her bedroom floor, her body a canvas of carnage, stabbed around 65 times with a kitchen knife plunged deep into her neck, chest, abdomen, and even her stomach sliced open, post-mortem, in a final act of rage. Blood splattered walls, pooled on floors, trailed through rooms, hinting at a desperate chase as she fought for life. Bare, bloody footprints stamped the scene, not hers, she wore socks, and semen stained the comforter where the assault unfolded. A bloody towel hung in the bathroom, a washcloth soaked red nearby, a t-shirt on the sink smeared with evidence, and more blood crusted the basin. This wasn't quick, it was deliberate fury, the killer wielding the blade over and over, ensuring silence in the dim apartment. Police swarmed the scene, collecting swabs of semen, blood mixtures, and those damning footprints. Suspicion first fell on her live and boyfriend, Arthur Gray. His DNA turned up on the comforter, but he had an alibi, and the unknown male profile from the semen and other spots didn't match. Leads chased Johns, acquaintances, anyone in her orbit, but the trail iced over. Child's family, shattered, buried her without answers. Her mother, Betty Eekman, learned of the murder while volunteering at the very building, a cruel twist. Sister Cindy Bloomer seethed at the killer's escape. Someone stabbed her 65 times and cut her open after. She didn't deserve that. The file joined hundreds of cold cases in Minneapolis PD's vault, gathering dust as years blurred memories. Decades later, in 2015, cold case detectives dusted it off, inspired by breakthroughs elsewhere. By 2018, partnering with the FBI, they sent a crime scene Dina sample to Dina Solutions, Inc. for advanced single nucleotide polymorphism profiling, a genetic snapshot revealing traits and relatives, not just identity. Uploaded to public genealogy sites like MyHeritage and GuideMatch, it pinged a hit, a first cousin to the unknown male. Genealogists built a family tree, cross-referencing records narrowing to siblings in Minnesota. One name surfaced, Jerry Westrom, then 26 at the time of the murder, a local with a spotty record, multiple DWIs, 2 arrests for soliciting prostitutes. Now 52, he lived in Asante as a seemingly ordinary businessman, a hockey dad shuttling kids to games, his past buried under suburbia. Investigators tailed him discreetly, waiting for a Dina discard. Opportunity struck at a youth hockey tournament in Wisconsin. Westrom bought a hot dog, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and tossed it in the trash. Cops fished it out, racing it to the lab. The short tandem repeat profile from his saliva matched the semen on the comforter, the blood Dina mix on the towel and washcloth, the stains on the t-shirt, and the sink residue, with odds of random match at 1 in trillions. It was him. Footprint experts later confirmed the bloody bare print at the scene mirrored Westrom's unique ridge patterns, placing his foot in her blood during the frenzy. On February 13, 2019, SWAT arrested Westrom at his Waite Park office, hauling him in for questioning. Pale and denying everything, he claimed no memory of Childs or Horn Towers, insisting he'd never set foot there. But the Dina screamed otherwise. Charged initially with second-degree murder, a grand jury upped it to first-degree premeditated. Westrom, out on $1 million bail, fought back. His lawyers attacked the Dina collection as a privacy invasion, arguing the napkin grab and genealogy search violated his rights. Courts swatted it down. He'd abandoned the napkin like curbside trash, and the analysis revealed only identity, not deep genetic secrets akin to fingerprinting. Trial kicked off in August 2022 before Hennepin County Judge Carrie Meyer. Prosecutors laid out the horror, the 65 wounds showing intent to kill, the chase implied by blood trails, Westrom's Dina woven through the scene like a confession. A 2019 police interview played. He lied about never being there, his denials crumbling under forensic truth. Footprint analyst Mark Ulrich testified the print was undeniably Westrom's, stepped in fresh blood post-attack. Defense attorney Steve Meshbesher countered, wrong guy, evidence thin, alternative suspects like Gray or others ignored. But the jury, after viewing grisly photos, deliberated just 2 hours. Guilty on first-degree murder. Foreperson Derek Frodenberg later explained, the Dina puts him there. The footprint puts him there at the murder. He lied in his interview. He chased her, stabbing over and over. He really wanted her dead. Westrom, stoic in court, faced life. Appeals followed. Minnesota Supreme Court in May 2024 upheld the first-degree conviction, affirming the evidence's strength, circumstantial but ironclad, premeditation inferred from the relentless stabs. They vacated the second-degree count as a lesser offense but rejected suppression bids, ruling no unconstitutional search. The U.S. Supreme Court declined review in October 2024. Westrom, now 59, rots in St. Cloud Prison. Eligible for parole after 30 years in 2052, at 86 if he lives that long. He emails claims of innocence, begging Innocence Projects to take his case, but the family finds fragile peace. Child's sister reflects, it's brutal, graphic, you can't let this go. Dina, that invisible snare, dragged a hidden monster from normalcy, proving even discarded napkins can resurrect buried sins and deliver delayed justice to a woman discarded in her own blood. Number 6. Robert Plimpton. In the wooded fringes near Mount Hood Community College in Gresham, Oregon, on a cold January day in 1980, 19-year-old Barbara Mae Tucker set out for a jog along a familiar trail. Tucker, a former student at the college, was petite and athletic, known for her routine runs through the quiet, tree-lined paths bordering the campus. She never returned home. Her body was discovered the next day in a secluded, overgrown area off the trail, partially clothed, brutally raped, and strangled with savage force that crushed her windpipe and left deep bruises across her neck. Semen evidence clung to her body, a silent marker of the violation before the killer choked the life from her. The scene screamed premeditation. She was dragged off the path into the brush, assaulted, then killed to eliminate any witness. No robbery, no struggle signs beyond the fight for air, pure predatory violence in broad daylight near a bustling campus. Gresham police arrived to a grim tableau. Swabs collected during the autopsy preserved the unknown male's DNA, but in 1980, forensic science offered nothing. No profiles, no databases. The case, Gresham's oldest unsolved homicide, went cold fast. Investigators chased leads, suspicious men in the area, acquaintances, transients, but nothing stuck. Tucker's family endured decades of unanswered questions, her memory fading into file cabinets as technology lagged. In 2000, with advances in DNA extraction, the Oregon State Police Crime Lab finally generated a male profile from those preserved swabs. Uploaded to CODIS, it yielded no hits. The killer remained a ghost. The breakthrough came in the late 2010s. Gresham detectives, refusing to let the case die, partnered with Parabon Nanolabs. In early 2021, a genealogist uploaded the profile to public genealogy databases, building a family tree from distant matches. The lineage pointed squarely to Robert Arthur Plimpton, then in his late 50s, living quietly in nearby Troutdale. Plimpton, a local man with no prior violent record on the surface, had been in the Gresham area in 1980, close enough to know the trails, spot a lone jogger, and act on impulse. Surveillance began discreetly. Opportunity struck when detectives watched Plimpton spit out a wad of chewing gum onto the ground during an outing. They collected it from the pavement, a discarded scrap turned evidence goldmine. The Oregon State Police Crime Lab ran the test. Na from Plimpton's saliva matched the semen profile from Tucker's body with probabilities in the trillions, no room for doubt. On June 8, 2021, authorities arrested him at home. Plimpton, stunned, denied any involvement, but the gum's genetic confession was irrefutable. Charged with aggravated murder, rape, and related counts, he faced trial in Multnomah County. The bench trial unfolded in early 2024 before Judge Amy Baggio, no jury, perhaps to avoid sensationalism in a 44-year-old case. Prosecutors detailed the horror, the rape and strangulation in the woods, the DNA linking Plimpton directly via semen, and the confirmatory gum sample. Genetic genealogy placed him in the suspect pool. The match sealed it. Defense pushed back, questioning chain of custody, suggesting contamination or coincidence, arguing no eyewitnesses or confession tied him definitively. But the evidence overwhelmed. The profile from 1980 swabs, preserved meticulously, matched Plimpton's to astronomical odds. On March 15, 2024, Judge Baggio delivered the verdict, guilty of first-degree murder, plus 4 counts of second-degree murder, alternative, and sexual assault charges. Plimpton, now 60, sat expressionless as the words landed. Sentencing followed in October 2024, life in prison with possibility of parole after 40 years, though at his age, it effectively meant dying behind bars. The judge cited the brutality and premeditation, the decades of suffering inflicted on Tucker's loved ones. Plimpton's ordinary life, suburban home, routine days crumbled under DNA's relentless truth. A discarded piece of gum, tossed without thought, became the thread that unraveled 44 years of evasion. For Tucker's family, justice arrived late but absolute, proving even the smallest trace, preserved through time, can snare a killer who thought he'd walked away clean. The wooded trail, once shadowed by fear, now stands as testament. Science resurrects the voiceless, exposing hidden monsters long after the screams fade. Number 7. Terrence Miller. In the rolling hills of Snohomish County, Washington, on a warm August afternoon in 1972, 20-year-old Jody Loomis pedaled her bicycle toward a stable to ride her horse, a routine escape from her quiet life in Bothell. Loomis, a slender young woman with long brown hair, lived at home with her family, working odd jobs and dreaming of simple joys. She rode north on North Road, crossed the Bothell-Everett Highway, and headed up Penny Creek Road, now Mill Creek Road, last seen alive around 5 p.m. by passing drivers. Minutes later, in a densely wooded ravine off the dirt path, a predator ambushed her. Dragged into the underbrush, she was raped with brutal force, her clothes torn away, semen left as a cruel signature on her discarded pants nearby. As she fought or tried to flee, the attacker pulled a .22 caliber pistol and fired a single shot into the back of her head, the bullet shattering her skull and lodging in her brain. She collapsed in the dirt, blood pooling amid the ferns. 2 mushroom hunters stumbled upon the horror around 5:30 p.m., finding Loomis partially nude, gasping faintly, a gunshot wound oozing from her temple. They rushed her to Stevens Memorial Hospital in Edmonds, but doctors pronounced her dead on arrival, the assault and execution too savage for survival. Autopsy confirmed the rape, vaginal trauma, semen samples collected and preserved. The scene yielded shell casings, footprints, and those pants stained with the killer's DNA. But in 1972, forensic tools were primitive. No profiles, no matches. Snohomish County Sheriff's detectives canvassed the area, interviewing locals and chasing vague leads, a suspicious car, a man seen nearby. But the trail froze. Loomis's family buried her in agony, her sister Patty haunted by the loss, the case slipping into cold storage for decades. Years blurred into oblivion. In 2008, with DNA Tech advancing, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab extracted a male profile from the semen on Loomis's pants, clear, uploadable to Cody's. No hits. The file gathered dust until 2013, when Detective Jim Scharf revived it, one of 20 cold cases on his desk. By 2018, genetic genealogy exploded onto the scene, cracking infamous cold cases like the Golden State Killer. Scharf teamed with genealogist C.C. Moore and Parabon Nanolabs. They uploaded the profile to GeneMatch, a public database where users shared DNA for family trees. Building backward from distant cousins, second, third, even fourth, Moore traced lineages through census records, obituaries, and social media. The tree converged on one name, Terrence Miller, then 26 in 1972. Living in Woodinville just 5 miles from the murder site. Miller, a welder and truck driver back then, had no violent record, blending into blue-collar life. Now 77, he resided in a modest Troutdale home with his wife, seemingly retired and ordinary. Detectives tailed him covertly, watching routines. Opportunity knocked at a shopping center. Miller sipped coffee from a disposable cup, then tossed it in a public trash bin. Cops retrieved it, swabbing the rim for saliva. The lab rush matched the semen profile with odds of 1 in 11 quintillion, irrefutable. Miller had hunted in those woods, knew the paths, and likely spotted Loomis alone, seizing the moment for rape and murder to cover his tracks. On April 10, 2019, SWAT surrounded Miller's home, arresting him without resistance. Charged with first-degree murder, he posted $1 million bail, denying everything. I don't know who she is. But evidence mounted, ballistics experts linked the .22 slug to a common pistol type he might have owned. Witnesses recalled him in the area. Trial began October 26, 2020, in Snohomish County Superior Court before Judge George Apple. Prosecutors painted the horror, the isolated ravine, the sexual assault amid the trees, the cold execution shot as she lay vulnerable. Na was the star witness, unassailable. Defense attorney Anna Gigliotti attacked the genealogy as unreliable junk science, questioning chain of custody on the 47-year-old evidence, suggesting contamination or coincidence. Miller, frail in a wheelchair, testified weakly, claiming no memory of Loomis or the woods. As the jury deliberated on November 9, 2020, Miller, remanded to Snohomish County Jail during trial, hanged himself in his cell with a bedsheet, discovered unresponsive at 11:35 a.m. Resuscitation failed, autopsy ruled suicide. Unaware, the jury returned hours later, guilty of first-degree murder. In December, Judge Appel upheld the posthumous conviction, a rare legal move ensuring the record reflected justice. Loomis's family found bittersweet closure. Patty, now elderly, said, "It's over," but he's gone without facing it. Miller's death robbed them of watching him rot, but Na had exposed the monster who'd evaded capture for half a century. A tossed coffee cup, that casual discard, unraveled decades of deception, proving even the oldest graves yield secrets when science listens. The wooded path, once a tomb of silence, now whispers vindication for a young woman pedaling toward death on an ordinary day.